get started. So welcome. Today we're going to be talking about finding the balance, technology, and active play in family childcare programs during COVID-19 outbreak. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll first go over logistics, and then our presenters will go ahead and take the lead. So our presenters today are Liz Turtel, Mary Quest, and Stephanie Ayala Salinas, and they're from Town Square, which is also part of the Erickson Institute. So let's just go over a little bit of logistics before we get started, as this is a webinar. Only the hosts will be talking or on video. We have turned off your audio and video capabilities. Please use the chat and Q&A functions. We ask that you use the chat for chatting and the Q&A for any questions that you have regarding logistics or content. We'll start out with about 30 to 40 minutes of presentation, largely lecture style, and then at the very end we'll have an opportunity for Q&A with the Town Square team. And so if you have content related questions, we'll go ahead and leave the questions there and we'll address them at the very end. If you'd like to take notes during, feel free. You'll also have access to the recording, the PDF of the slides, as well as the handout. We are recording this webinar and we'll share it with everyone who registered as soon as we can. And we just want to let you know that we cannot provide, at this time, we cannot provide CPDUs or CEUs for these webinars. However, if you'd like to learn more about our professional development services or Town Square, you can go to both of our websites and we'll share more information at the end. So we want to give some background about Tech Center and Erickson Institute. If you're not aware, if you haven't attended our other webinars before, this is part of our spring and summer 2020 webinar learning series. And so each week around this time, we have webinars for early childhood practitioners on a wide range of topics, largely focused on how are we supporting families and children using technology during these times. Our Tech Center team is with you today. Alexis is another host, and she'll be introducing the Town Square team. Missy is a PhD student and is helping you in the chat and Q&A function, and then Morgan is an intern. And just to let you know, we're going to record this webinar and you'll receive it in the email after, I believe tomorrow. So housed within Erickson Institute is the Tech Center, which is a research lab and outreach center dedicated to connecting theory, policy, and research to practice. As a center focused on technology and child development, we conduct in-house research on the use and effects of technology with children and adolescents. We offer professional development, webinars such as these, and support services to improve technology use and practice. We also support policy and leadership. For those of you who do not know, Erickson Institute is located in Chicago, which is great because many of you are from Illinois and Chicago. Erickson Institute is a graduate school in child development, early education, and social work. I highly recommend you check out Erickson's website. There are a plethora of resources, continuing education programs, graduate school opportunities. So go ahead and click that link in the chat box. If this is your first opportunity hearing and connecting with Tech Center, we're glad you're here. We also want to let you know that, like I said before, there are other resources and opportunities to learn more. So specifically with Tech Center, we have professional development, we have educator tips and lesson plans, as well as research on our website. And then Erickson Institute, we have a summer institute coming up, and so go ahead and check that out, which the link will be in the chat, as well as the Erickson Institute MSECE degree online with the STEM concentration. And so we'll go ahead and I'll pass things off to the Town Square team and Alexis, finding the balance, technology and active play in family child care programs during COVID-19 outbreak.
Thank you, Jenna. That was a great introduction. And thank you again, everyone, for coming and participating. We know it's later in the evening. We hoped this time would be better for people. But we really are appreciative of you spending some time with us today. As Jenna did a great job introducing, we have been collaborating with others at Erickson to really get you the best of the best content to support you and to support families and to support children at this time. And this week, our focus has been on sharing some of the work that Town Square and their team have been doing, looking at technology and active play in the family child care program specifically. So I will hand this off to them. And let Liz Hertel, Mary Quest, and Stephanie Ayaya Salinas present some really wonderful content throughout the next 30 or so minutes. Do ask questions in the Q&A section, as Jenna mentioned, and I actually will be live closed captioning this. So if you need that service, it'll be there, and I will write that right now.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Quest. I am one of the co-directors of Town Square. Town Square was created in 2016 at Erickson with federal Race to the Top funding that came through Illinois. And what Town Square is an online learning community. So essentially it's a website that has resources and professional development that was created for and with family child care providers. So we have now started building beyond Illinois. Obviously, as a website, we're available to anyone, anywhere, anytime. But the content has been Illinois tailored. And we now are working on a Town Square, Indiana site that has some tailored content for providers in Indiana. And so while this is open and available to anyone who's doing family childcare or really anyone who's working in early childhood, if you sign on to Town Square and you create an account, which I'd encourage you to do if you haven't heard of Town Square, you have the option, if you're from Illinois or Indiana, to include that in your profile, and then you'll see the content that is specifically tailored for those states. If you're from another state, you still can see a lot of our shared resources that are, we think, excellent resources for anyone, anywhere that's working with young children, particularly in family child care programs. And I see so many people are in attendance today that are not family child care providers, which I think is also fantastic. And we'd love for you to check out the site and spread the word. I think that you will find resources that are relevant and useful regardless of the program, this type of program that you work in. So please check out Town Square. You should see a link for that. I think at the end it'll come up. And I think we have a poll coming up now. So what we'd like you to think about are the types of constraints and adjustments and challenges that you maybe have been facing since the quarantine began. And so this question is really meant to give us a sense of what you're finding to be the areas that you've had to adjust in terms of your practice. And so we're wondering what's the biggest adjustment you've made since sheltering in place? Has it been really trying to manage interactions through screens? Has it been limitations in the time that you're able to spend outdoors with children, especially when you work with young children? Or is it both? So take a moment now and enter your response in the poll. And then hopefully we'll hear what people had to say about, or see what people had to say in response to that. Okay, so a lot of folks felt like both have been challenging, but many people feeling that managing interactions through screens. It feels like a lot of uncharted territory right now in terms of how to navigate all of that. So hopefully we have some ideas we can share with you in the webinar this evening that helps you find the balance. Okay. Do I need to close the poll? No? Okay.
I think I went way too ahead. There we go. All right. So as Mary mentioned, we're going to focus today on finding the balance, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean by finding the balance with technology and active play. Then we're going to go over, just a quick overview of what exactly it means when we say developmentally appropriate technology use. Again, this is focused for family childcare program, but this is just developmentally appropriate for any child, specifically young children. Then we have two types of activities that we're going to share. First is a light and shadow play activity, and then it's a digital photography and video play activity. And then lastly, as Jenna mentioned, we're going to do a Q&A, and if you have questions while we're presenting, please put them in the box, and then we'll answer at the end.
Okay, and so we were thinking about this topic for this evening, and we spoke with some providers and realized that providers who have remained open to provide care for essential workers, or even now at this point, providers who are in the process of reopening as restrictions are being eased in many states, are faced with trying to find this balance with this increase in screen time, and then potentially limitations on being able to be outside depending on your location, and feeling like it's safe to take groups of children outside. And so the focus of the webinar is really to look at ways that we can consider using technology in very appropriate ways and to engage children of multiple ages actively and appropriately. And to encourage big body play activities, especially if you are in an area where you feel more limited in getting out, or the places that you might typically take children, like the playground or the zoo, are not available options at this point. And we've tailored this for family childcare providers who provide care in their homes, but this I think also is going to have a lot of relevant information for anyone who is working with young children or for families of young children. And so hopefully our hope for you is that you'll come away from the webinar with at least one really great idea that you want to try in your home or in your program to get children engaged really actively in play activities and using technology in a wide range of ways. Liz, you're on mute.
There we go. So here's some guidelines to think about developmentally appropriate technology use. First, it's important to think about passive versus active screen time. Passive or inappropriate screen time would include TV on in the background or just watching a show or a movie. But interactive or appropriate tech use includes perhaps doing an exercise video together, co-watching a live animal chat for the zoo, using Alexa to look up a new word in a book, or perhaps a video chat with a parent during lunch, as this first picture indicates. Or even calling and singing a song about missing you to kids who are not in attendance. Next, it's important to think about tech as a tool. Like any other tool or material, technology can support active engagement. Rather than using technology just for the sake of using technology, an important question to ask is, does this tech tool enhance, extend, or improve the activity in some way? An example of this is I recently spoke with a provider who used the ruler function in her phone to measure how far children were jumping. All ages of children got interested in this, and they started using the measuring function in different ways. Some of the younger children started using different items to also, like their shoes. The older children started taking pictures, and then the oldest group put together a PowerPoint for families to share the learning. So everyone was using technology to support learning and communication. Just like other tools we use to support children's play, whether that be blocks, art materials, or anything else in our program. Lastly, it's important to start with the children's interest to guide the planning. We can validate children's interest by supporting and extending play, and technology can support play and development. This might be supporting a child who's interested in watching birds, and by watching the live eagle nest cam that was on YouTube, which is the second group, the second picture here, or perhaps adding flashlight to magnetiles when children notice the light coming through them. And now I think we have another poll coming up.
Why does the poll?
Okay. So is it more challenging during this time for you to first find active large motor play activities for children to engage in safely, or find appropriate ways to engage children with technology, or both? So we'd like you to ask that question. Is it more challenging to find large active motor play activities for children to engage in, or to find appropriate ways to engage children with technology, or both? We're going to wait for some answers to come in. So most people said that it was both, finding active large motor activities for children to engage in and to engage with technology in an appropriate way.
All right. So based on that poll, so one item that we're going to talk about when we talk about technology, and as Liz mentioned, is technology as a tool. And there are, as you can read in our research to practice, there's different types of tools. So there's low and high tech tools. So we're going to talk here a little bit about low tech tool that you might think of like an iPad as a high tech tool, and that's great to have. But let's think about lower end tech tools. So this is just lights and shadows, very easy to find, very affordable. It's something that children really enjoy. It fascinates them because they don't know why it happens. It's like the curiosity in them, and they use it all around them. So some of the activities that we're going to talk about are flashlight tag, shadow puppets, and then tracing shadows. But I really want to talk about the picture that we have here. So this is a do-it-yourself light table. So we have a resource in Town Square that shows you step-by-step video on how to make very simple light table. It's just a container and some push lights. And anyone can make this. Again, very affordable to make. And children can have fun playing not only with items on top, but also if you open it up, they can play inside of it. There's various ways that they can play with that item. Again, a low tech use of technology. Okay, this is flashlight tag. So, and you can play this in various ways. You can have just one flashlight and then just like normal tag. And this is all based on what you're comfortable with. Turn off the lights, dim the lights, leave the lights on. It's more fun if there's, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of darkness, and you can just play tag. But if you don't have the space to accommodate that, you can also just have each child hold a flashlight and then try to point at each other. Different type of tag. You can also hide items, so toys, anything that you have in the house under a blanket, under a towel, and then try to ask the children to find the item underneath. Another way to play with tag, and it's very fun because they get to find it. So like they're searching for something with a flashlight. Next we have shadow puppets. In these pictures, both of these are cutouts, as you can tell, but you can use finger puppets. You can also use your body for this. If you have Legos or blocks, you could create a structure and build around this to create a puppet show. You could create the puppet show and then allow the children to create their own puppet show, maybe rotate turns on who gets to tell the story with the puppets, or just create in a collaboration of puppet shows. And these are very simple to make. It doesn't take a lot. You could always focus on, maybe in the morning you create the puppets, and then in the afternoon you actually play with the puppets, you know. Maybe read a book first and then develop the puppets from the book, ask the children to develop their own characters. So we really want to expand on this idea of like, this is what a shadow will look like if you put the light, right? And then you could also focus on where can we place the light, and how would that look once we move the puppets? So a lot to expand on this one simple activity.
Hey, Steph, can I jump in quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have multiple age children in your program, I think something else you can think about is, even for the younger kids to get into the scene with the shadow puppets. And then if you have children that are really into storytelling, something that in my own personal household that has become an essential tool right now is the voice to text function in Google Docs. And so for children who want to create a story around the scene that you've created with the shadow puppets, you can extend that. And it's really simple to use. And then, you know, they just speak the story and it shows up in a document. So I think that's another sort of maybe way to extend this activity, or take it in a direction that sort of flows with the children's interest.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mary. Okay, and then the last activity we'll talk about for lights and shadows is tracing, shadow tracing. So in the first pictures, you can see this is a large piece of paper on a wall. Again, it's dependent on the space that's available. This is very fun to do, especially if you have a projector. So you can shine like a structure and the children can trace it. In the second picture, we have just an item. So this could be if they build something with blocks, Legos, a toy that they really love. And this is really fun to do just because it doesn't have to be a light, like a flashlight. It could be that you put a table close to a window and the light shines through it. So then maybe the next day you put the table in front of a different window and see how that shadow works. You could also extend this activity by one day tracing, and the next day maybe you color it with crayons, markers, watercolor. Or you can do this activity for several days and see how the shadows change because of the weather outside or because of where you were sitting. There's just a lot of ways that you can extend this, and it's very simple. Again, you don't really need a physical light. You just need any type of light that you can see a shadow. You could also work in partners or work as a group together to create something bigger, like in the first picture.
Yeah, Steph, I'm going to jump in here
Yeah,
also.
go ahead, jump in.
The other thing that you can do looking at the first picture is you can ask children to create a movement, whether that be jumping, doing jumping jacks, whatever that is, and have them draw it. And it's another way to sort of do Simon Says when you pull the different body types up for children to figure that out.
Yep. And
I feel like there's a lot of ideas here.
You're talking about the different types of lights, and I just realized that right next to me is like a work light that I've used for activities like this. So you don't have to buy a whole bunch of like a projector or a bunch of equipment or something. You know, you're likely to have something you can use right in your house.
Yeah, you can even like try to figure out if like you have a light bulb and how can you block that light to then project a different light. There's various ways that you can play around with that whole shadow part in the house. You don't really have to buy any expensive equipment for that.
All right, so I'm going to jump in here and we're going to look at maybe some things that are a little more high tech, where we're going to use digital photography or video, which I think in and of itself, if the children in your care are like my own children, they're really interested in this. Adults are always doing things with their phones, so you can come up with some really interesting things that children can do that are really active and kind of engaging, but that are really using this technology in an interesting and creative way. So let's see, what do we have a slide that has an overview? I think we do. Yeah, so we're going to look at 3 examples or ideas here. The other thing that I want to put out there is, as you're thinking of other ways that you've used technology that have gone really successfully with the children you care for, when we get to the Q&A, you know, feel free to add those into the chat box so that you're coming away with as many ideas as possible. So everybody has a video and a video camera and a still camera in their hands these days in their phone. So these are the ideas we've come up with. The first one is to look at creating an obstacle course. And so the first thing you would do, and again, this is, as Steph said, this is looking at the space that you have and what you're comfortable with and how children can use that space. So if you can go to the next slide, Steph, you'll see the one idea for how to go about doing this. And so depending on what you would like the children to use, you can have them design an obstacle course using the furniture and the things that you have in your program in your home, and take a photo of the obstacle, and you can have everything set up within the space that you're using for your childcare, and have the photo, print the photos, and then shuffle them so that part of the challenge of the obstacle course is to do it in the order that comes up. And here you can see I really found an easy way to just add, this is a direction. You're going to go over these chairs, you'll go under these chairs, and then, you know, children can play around. It could go on for a long time if your kids are like mine, to come up with so many different ways to do the obstacle course. And so this is just one of the ideas we had. The next one is to have children create a dance move. This is my child. And he demoed his dance move, and we made a video, which is sort of like to show other people how to do your dance move. And then you can take this in a lot of directions as well, I think, where you can look at how to string these together into a larger full dance routine, or have them do a dance off, or, you know, there's a variety of ways you can use that. We also have an Amazon Echo in our house, and the children have a playlist. So they have dance music that they like to use with Alexa. So this is just another idea that we had. And then the third one in this section is to create a scavenger hunt. And so again, you don't need to go get any items for this. And what the children would do is use the zoom function on the digital camera or your phone to take a really close-up picture. And then other children have to try to figure out, what is this item and where do I find it, and move around your space to try to locate the item of the close-up. So this is one way to do a scavenger hunt. I think you can, once you start going with the digital photos, you can come up with so many other ways to use photos and incorporate them into a scavenger hunt. And I think the nice thing about this is, again, multi-age, so you have non-readers in your group and readers in your group, and this is accessible to everyone. Okay.
We suggest that you look for resources that are available out there. So this webinar is a great example, and the other webinars that the Tech Center offers. Talk to other providers who are either currently caring for children or are doing it digitally. It's really important to take your cues from children. They're managing a very challenging time, and their needs will vary day to day. And so that variance of day to day will help you determine what they need for that day. And lastly, we just want to remind you that we have shared the Town Square Research to Practice statement on developmentally appropriate technology use. And these statements take the theory and research around a topic and condense it with examples that are in family child care centers. So it gives you a great way to sort of think about how you're taking practice, taking theory into practice. And so now I think we're ready for questions. Is that correct?
Yes. Before we get into Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and just drop this Google form into the chat. You'll also receive this once, I believe, once you close out of the Zoom webinar or in your email. But this is really just a short questionnaire about how you're using technology. What does your practice look like during these times? And just if you'd like to hear more, see more webinars, what topics are you interested in? And then we can go ahead and get started with the Q&A. You can either pull up the Google form right now and fill it out later, or you'll receive it after this webinar. So Steph, if you want to change the slide to the Q&A, and then we can go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, go ahead and add them into the Q&A, and the Town Square team can go ahead and start answering questions. But I just want to say thank you so much, Steph, Liz, and Mary. That was such a wonderful webinar and so many great ideas. Yeah, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, add them in the Q&A, and we have a little bit of time to answer those questions you have.
Jenna, I want to encourage people to share some ideas that they've had too with other people. So please share those in chat.
Mm-hmm. So good. I see this question. What are your thoughts, ideas for very young children? So thinking about infants and toddlers. I think going back to that slide with developmentally appropriate technology use and thinking about, where are they showing interest? And obviously passive screen time, as we said, is not something that you want children to engage with. We get this question a lot about, and we have a slide where the child is doing FaceTime with his mom during lunchtime. And this sort of interactive, via a video chat is a really different kind of screen time that's not passive. And so I know even for my own children, that kind of interaction on a screen was really interesting to them as infants and toddlers, to be able to see grandma or to see an aunt or an uncle on a screen and have an interaction. I think the other thing for infants and toddlers, particularly in a multi-age setting, is they tend to want to be involved in what those older kids are doing. And so trying to find ways, I think the example with the flashlights was a great one because we saw toddlers in that image. And that's from one of our family childcare providers who's created content for Town Square. So finding ways to make sure that they can engage in that where they are developmentally with the older children in ways that are interesting and make them feel like they're participating.
Yeah, I want to jump in. Infants and toddlers also really love light and shadows, and using different kinds of lights to look at creating shadows in the classrooms, or even rope Christmas lights because they don't get hot, and are kind of interesting for them to move it and think about it.
Yeah, I would also say when I was in a toddler classroom, flashlights and scarves are always a really fun activity because you can change the color that comes out. You just tie the scarf around and now it's blue, and then you switch it and it's red, and they like to go shine and like, this is also red. So it's also a fun activity just to for colors and also the light that's coming out of the flashlight.
There was a question about how long Zoom meetings should be. Good question. I think all of us can get a little Zoom burnout. And so I think thinking about how do you make it developmentally appropriate for children so that they're active and engaged. Teaching our classes remotely. Oftentimes, after an hour, I see our students and our graduate students
Our
getting
grown-up students, yeah.
having a hard time sitting still. So it's thinking about how do I do that in an interesting way. Recently, somebody just told me about something called Flipgrid, where they people can create stories, and that way children and families can watch them on their own at any time. So you really want to think about how would you mirror some of these that you would in the classroom, right? You wouldn't ask children to sit down at circle time for really long times. So how are you gauging that interaction?
Mhm. And there's a question about any ideas for virtual games with birth to 5-year-olds, as in when both parties are in different places.
So a couple of things that I've seen work pretty well, if you have 2 sets of like Uno cards, you can play that with somebody who has their own set. Do you have other ideas, Liz, or
So there's also a game that I don't know what you call it, but you put a picture or a word up on your head, right? And the other person, and so for
headbands?
headbands. So children, you could have a picture for very young children and have them describe it to the other person. I think the other thing that you could do is do story dictation, right? Where children are telling your story and you're writing it down and giving it back, and maybe the other person is acting it out. So there's lots of, I think there would be lots of things that you would think about. What would I want to happen in my classroom, and how can I adapt that to creating that same thing over Zoom or other technology.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question here about activities that are appropriate for children with autism as well. Do any activities or tools specifically come to mind?
In particular, go ahead, Liz.
No, go ahead, Mary.
So the question is, in particular for children with autism, I think it's with any child, you have to look at where they are and where their capacity is and what their interest is. And what is, I feel like light and shadow could be interesting. It might also be really difficult depending on their own sensitivity. And so you have to sort of tailor it based on that child. Steph, do you?
It's also listening to what that child is interested in. So it's making that connection of, right? Alexis just posted that they played bingo online. So is it, right? Is that child very interested in monsters? Maybe you create a monster bingo, right? Whatever, you're making that connection of what that child's interest and developmental level is to the work that you want to do.
I think if they have a particular topic, I'm sorry, Alexis, you were going to jump in. If there's a particular topic or something, I know, being able to research something even on the internet is really interesting. And even if it's just creating a slide deck of images of something that's a topic of interest, and building stories around that, or looking at what's the same, what's different. And again, depending on the age of the child. Sorry, Alexis, you were going to jump in.
I think one of the actual benefits of some of these Zoom meetings and some of the lack of high face-to-face contact that we're not doing right now in a lot of settings actually leads it into interesting opportunities for children who struggle with that, with those face-to-face interactions and encounters. So bringing some of that back, if you are reopening and have been doing Zoom or other ways to connect, find ways where you can bring back some of that low face-to-face interaction for kids who struggle with that. Maybe doing printing out pictures of kids in the class from the Zoom call, and having to identify maybe their emotions. Are they happy? Are they looking sad? It may not be happy from the Zoom call, but thinking about those creative ways to bridge this world that may be going back and forth between remote and in person is another good idea for all kids.
Jenna, I think there was a question about parents being how to support parent engagement during this time. I think we also have to think about the high stress level of parents at this time. So realizing that they're often working to trying to support their children, and then the varied other things that we want to do. So I think it's really all about the relationship that you make with families, and talk about and acknowledge that it might be kind of tricky right now to be on a Zoom call with your child, but here's why I'm doing it, and that I want to keep the connection between home and school going. So being very transparent with parents, but also I think understanding that it's a tricky time for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the large or the active play kinds of things, I know as a parent that if it's something that we have the materials to do on hand, it's a lot more likely that we're going to do it. So Steph, I know we've got a couple of resources for active play, and all you need is a roll of masking tape or some yarn or something that you don't have to sort of figure out how to get your hands on the things that you need to do this activity. I think it's important to keep that in mind. And I think if you find something that you think children would enjoy and you share it, and you just continue sharing things, eventually, you know, something that seems like it'll work for that parent and that child is hopefully going to be used. So I know in the huge amount of ideas that have been shared with our family from the teachers, from my children's teachers, you know, we may only do one of a handful of those, but I'm so grateful to have that idea out there.
I also think it's important that when you are sharing ideas, like Mary mentioned, that you try to build that relationship, but also understand that maybe that child, if it's a young child, they have older siblings, and the family might be focusing on the older sibling and can't focus on the younger one. So maybe find activities that can reach both ages. So then the family could incorporate both of the children into one activity. I'm just looking out for activities that anyone can do, everyone can do, that doesn't depend on the age. So then they're more likely to engage on that activity because they can engage the whole family.
I think in looking at this question another way, I think technology is a great way to engage families too, right? And especially when we're back in programs, because I think a lot of times seeing your child in action, right? So having a video of something that your child did is really gonna help you see the great things that are going on in school. So I think you can think about it in a two-way street here.
Definitely.
Oh, speak louder.
So somebody mentioned, how do you cater to children with disabilities such as blindness or hearing? Do you have any tools or activities that specifically come to mind when supporting those children? I know there are many apps and websites and technology tools, right? There's so many really wonderful assistive technology tools that are out there that can read the text or that can read a caption of the description of a photo. And there are a lot of assistive tech tools out there, so I can go ahead and look that up and add to the post email to send that all out to you guys. But there's many technology tools that are new and upcoming. But Mary, Liz, and
Yeah.
do you have any that specifically come to mind?
I was looking at the thing. I think you have to, again, go back to the developmental level of the child. And I think for young children, you always want to start with engaging senses and thinking about how to follow those things that they're interested in, and get things into their hands and kind of supporting them where they are at. Are there other thoughts about in particular? And I'm not sure if the question is about technology specifically or just more generally.
I believe the question is,
Okay. I don't know that it was, it asked specifically
it
about
just says how
technology.
to best cater for those children.
Mm.
I think just going back to what Jenna said, it's really sort of looking at what sort of apps can help assist children, be it a low tech, right? So we have some resources in Town Square looking at putting popsicle sticks on a book so that a child who has trouble doing that can turn the pages a little easier. So it's really sort of looking at what sort of assistive technology might help that child be more successful in your program.
And I think depending on what type of difference that you're dealing with the child, that you think about your environment and how you're setting up the space to accommodate as well.
And what about, are there any ideas for real-time response to questions that are asked, like a click a link example for literacy gains? I know there are many ways that you can collaborate and communicate in real time using technology if you're not, you know, supposed to be together or serving children face to face. Something like Zoom or Google Meetups, or even using with younger children, there are many kind of portfolio apps that you can collaborate on, sort of like these blank whiteboards together. Steph, Mary Liz, do you have any ideas? I know that we've brought them up in other webinars recently, but.
I think also just if you are using video chat, a good way to get kids moving is to have them all be on mute potentially, and then use different hand movements or body movements in order to react. So if your favorite color is purple, put your finger on your nose, right? Or just typical things you would have done in your classroom, but that are now being done virtually is a great way to get them to respond. Or, you know, if you're thinking about how many of you went outside yesterday, of course you could do raise your hand, or you could do something more fun and ask them to, you know, do a jumping jack or to do something else to respond to your prompt, as opposed to just clicking a button. So again, thinking about the developmental abilities of the kids and their level of engagement. What's fun for a 4-year-old? Pushing a button is only so fun for all of us. So finding creative ways to kind of make it more like your childcare setting, where it's fun and connected and engaging and responsive is a great way to think about that.
I think depending on the way you would normally do things and sort of what the expectations are for you, because I'm not going to suggest that you double the amount of times you're doing things, but if you would normally do things with small groups, I think that's another way you can look at, you know, all right, I don't want all of the children in one big group if I'm really trying to have some back and forth where there's questions and answers and I can really hear each child. And again, it depends on the age and how much time you're going to spend with them in a video meeting. But I think thinking about groups is probably one way you could do that.
What activities can, we can do this one. What activities can you do with a child if you are limited for gross motor activity because you live above others or have no yard? And we can go ahead and say that this is the last one because I just looked at the time and we're running out.
Okay.
So gross motor, if you are limited for gross motor activities, what do you suggest?
So I actually think there's lots of fun things that you can do. One, you could do some yoga, which is a little quieter and not jumping, just moving like an animal. So how would a snake move, and thinking about quieter animals might be one. Another that we've done, Steph, is that we've had children create different poses for the alphabet, and we've taken pictures of that to create our alphabet in a classroom. So I think those are some of them.
Steph, I'm thinking about that new resource that you're just putting out on Town
Yeah.
Square. And so I know one of the examples that's part of that resource is, and this works well for toddlers, you have a balloon that you can hang down in a doorway, and you can create a little racket or paddle with a paper plate and a paper towel tube, and kind of, it's almost like tetherball, right? But you're swatting at it, and that gets your arms moving in a different way, in a large motor way. My sister's 2-year-old, she said, spent 45 minutes playing with that. So seems like it's it's something that kids that age would be interested in. What else do we have on that handout, Steph?
Yeah, I
that
was
we
gonna say
can
the one that's
share?
already there. We have like the ball toss that you can do with just boxes that you have in the house, and you can do it with like a softball if you don't have to like hit a really hard bounce. We have the other one is a little bit of running, but you can also ask, instead of like they do the activity, they could just like quietly tiptoe across. If you put like a tape, you can do like a hopscotch with painter's tape. But again, ask like, can you tiptoe or can you slide, or something that's not as harsh if you are like in an upper floor.
Yeah. The other one I was thinking about is the laser maze, where you could use string or yarn, or even just masking tape. And if you have a hallway or a corridor or something, and you string it up in all different angles, and then the kids move through it like those are lasers, because it doesn't create a lot of pounding, but they're moving their bodies in a wider range of ways.
I think that there's also some target games you can do. We've taken tape and double stick tape and put that up as a spider web, and had pom-poms, and kids have thrown them at the spider web. So thinking about ball-like things that are quieter might help.
Yeah. Yep, perfect. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you so much to the Town Square team, Liz, Mary, Steph. Everybody who registered will be getting an email, I believe, tomorrow, one with the recording of this webinar, as well as the recording of this webinar in Spanish, the PDF of the slides, as well as a link to the handout. And if you scroll through the chat, I also just dropped a bunch of great resources from Common Sense Media. I know we didn't mention them throughout this webinar, but if you want to look up, they have really great lists of their favorite apps and websites for young children. They evaluate apps and tech tools for kids and families. And so you can just look up, best apps for children with special needs or autism or for certain subjects. But thank you again for the Town Square team. That was a wonderful webinar, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.